A B-17 flying fortress named Hell's Fury drones through thin, freezing air deep in hostile skies. In the very back of the aircraft, sealed inside a cramped glass bubble, Staff Sergeant Michael Mad Mike Donovan sits at his twin 50 caliber machine guns, eyes locked on the darkness behind them, out on the horizon like shards of black glass against the gray sky. 12 Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds begin to form up. Standard protocol says one thing: stay in your position, hold your fire, wait for them to commit. Training drills it in over and over. Conserve ammunition, don't waste rounds at long range, stay alive. Every instinct of self-preservation tells you to make yourself small and hope the fighters pick another target. Donovan doesn't care about protocol, training, or self-preservation. In the next 4 minutes, those 12 German fighters will be falling out of the sky. Not one American on his plane will be killed, and every gunner in the 8th Air Force will hear a new word whispered with awe and disbelief: aggression. This is the story of how one tail gunner turned the most vulnerable spot on a B-17 into its deadliest weapon. How a man whose job was supposed to be defensive turned desperation into a doctrine. How a kid from South Boston rewrote the rules of air combat by doing the one thing everyone told him never to do: attack. Michael Donovan didn't learn survival in a classroom. He learned it on cracked sidewalks and back alleys. He grew up in South Boston, where talking back to the wrong guy could mean losing teeth, and hesitation meant waking up in the gutter. His father hauled cargo on the docks. His older brother fought in Golden Gloves bouts under flickering gym lights, swallowing blood between rounds and coming back for more. Mike watched, listened, learned. Hit first. Hit hard. Never wait to see what the other man is going to do. By 17, Donovan had been in more fights than most men have arguments. 32 street brawls he could remember, probably more he'd forgotten. He won 28 of them, lost 4. Every loss had something in common. He'd hesitated, started too late, let the other man act first. He didn't make that mistake anymore. When news came roaring over the radio about Pearl Harbor, when the photographs showed burning ships and black smoke boiling into Hawaiian skies, Donovan didn't think twice. He enlisted in the Army Air Forces. The recruiters saw a stocky, hard-eyed kid from the docks and figured he'd be good on the ground, turning wrenches, loading bombs, doing the unglamorous work that kept planes flying. Donovan said no. He wanted a gun turret and a clear field of fire. They sent him to gunnery school. That's where his reputation began. Most trainees tried to impress instructors with precision, discipline, patience. Donovan impressed them with something else entirely. He was fast, unnervingly fast. He snapped from target to target before the instructors could finish their commands. He tracked, adjusted, and fired in one fluid motion, as if the guns were just an extension of his arms. The instructors didn't like it. Too aggressive, they said. Too willing to expose himself. Too eager to chase targets instead of letting them come to him. He'd lean too far into the turret, follow fighters beyond the safe angle, risk taking a burst of return fire straight through the glass. One instructor finally told him, "You're going to get yourself killed with that attitude." Donovan's answer traveled through the camp like gossip. Dead gunners don't shoot back. Live ones do. He didn't graduate first in accuracy. He graduated near the top because of speed, because he could acquire and engage targets faster than any other trainee they had. When they ran exercises with simulated fighters approaching in waves, Donovan consistently got his sights on the enemy first. His secret was simple. He refused to wait for the enemy to enter his textbook firing zone. He went looking for them before they got there. By March 1944, Donovan found himself assigned to the 390th Bombardment Group at Framlingham, England, 8th Air Force Country. Endless rows of B-17 seconds lined up on wet English fields, engines coughing smoke in the morning fog, crews smoking in groups, pretending not to be nervous before missions. His new home was a fortress called Hell's Fury. The aircraft already carried a reputation the way some men carried scars. 3 missions flown, 2 times nearly torn apart by German fighters. The previous tail gunner, Sergeant Eddie Morrison, had survived barely. But survival hadn't erased what that plexiglass bubble had done to his nerves. He went to the crew chief and said, That position's cursed. Next guy who sits back there is a dead man. When Donovan heard that, he didn't flinch. I'll take it, he said. Captain James Whitmore, Hell's Fury's pilot, didn't just accept that blindly. He called Donovan over and looked him straight in the eye. You know the numbers? Whitmore asked. Tail gunners die more than anyone else back there. 38% never finish their tour. Almost 4 in 10. Then I've got 62% on my side, Donovan answered. I'll take those odds. Why the hell would you volunteer for the worst seat on the plane? Because I don't sit around waiting for them to kill me, Donovan said. I kill them first. Whitmore stared at him for a long second, then snorted quietly. You're insane, he said. You'll fit in just fine. Donovan's first mission with Hell's Fury came on March 2nd, 1944. The target, a ball-bearing plant at Schweinfurt, a name every bomber crewman already hated. Schweinfurt meant fighters. Schweinfurt meant smoke and fire and empty bunks at the end of the day. On that mission, Donovan shot 1 Bf-109 out of the sky and chewed up 2 more. But it wasn't the kill count that got everyone talking. It was how he did it. Tail gunners were supposed to play defense. You waited until the fighters lined up their attack runs, until they closed to that comfortable range where your odds of hitting were high. You conserved your ammunition because you knew more waves were coming, more passes, more threats. Donovan ignored that completely. As soon as he saw fighters forming up behind the formation, still far out, still organizing, he opened up. Long-range bursts arcing out across the empty air, tracers streaking toward the tiny black specks. At that range, most of his bullets had no realistic chance of hitting anything. But that wasn't what he was aiming for. He wanted to get into their heads. One burst at 800 yards cost him 20 rounds. If it forced even one German pilot to break formation, to peel away, to abandon his perfect firing line, then those 20 rounds had just saved 10,000 pounds of airplane and 9 men's lives. The math made sense to him. On his second mission, March 4th, another factory, another run into the grinder, Donovan experimented. When a group of Messerschmitts came screaming in from 6 o'clock high, classic stern attack, he did something no manual told him to do. He ignored the lead fighter. Every new gunner was taught. The lead aircraft is the danger. Track it, hit it, stop it from getting within firing range. Donovan aimed at the second plane in the formation, the wingman. The man flying in support, not expecting to draw fire yet, not expecting to become the primary target so soon. To maintain formation, the wingman flew a predictably steady line, which made him easier to hit. Donovan's rounds stitched across the sky and found that second plane. The fighter blew apart in midair. The lead pilot, suddenly alone, suddenly without his wingman, did what human beings do when their formation disintegrates. He broke off. The entire attack unraveled before it could properly form. After landing, the crew chief, Sergeant Frank Murphy, went over the numbers. You fired 1,600 rounds, Murphy told him. Standard load is 2,000. You burned 80% of your ammo on one mission. And we didn't get hit, Donovan answered. I'll make that trade any day. But even that wasn't enough for him. He'd disrupted attacks. He'd shaken German formations. But in his mind, he hadn't pushed things as far as they could go. That night, when the others slept or played cards, Donovan studied. He watched diagrams of German fighter tactics, pored over briefing notes, replayed missions in his head. He noted how the fighters preferred to come in, 4 to 6 at a time, stepped diagonally in an echelon, sliding in from stern quarter high. One lead fighter took the spotlight, soaking up the gunner's attention. The wingman exploited distraction, slipping in on slightly different angles. American gunners were trained to do the obvious thing. Follow the big, obvious threat. Wait, track, engage when you are sure of your hits. Donovan saw the pattern clearly. The Germans always had the initiative. They chose when to attack, how to attack, where to attack. Every American doctrine assumed that the defender's job was simply to react, to maintain discipline, to respond correctly, to survive. What if you flipped it? What if the defender refused to act like a victim? What if, instead of letting the Germans dictate everything, the tail gunner forced them to respond, to defend, to improvise? Donovan began forming a new idea in his head. Not just a trick, a philosophy. Don't let the enemy be the hunter. Become the hunter. By the time March 6th arrived, the plan was ready in his mind. That morning's target was Augsburg, an aircraft factory buried deep in Germany. Intelligence briefings said the mission would be hell, 800 B-17 seconds in the air, and as many as 2,500 German fighters expected to oppose them. The men in that briefing room didn't need charts or graphs to understand what that meant. Some of them would not be coming home. Captain Whitmore scanned his crew before they took off, his tone calm but firm. "This one's going to hurt," he said. "Stay sharp, stay alive, do your jobs, and we'll get through it." Donovan raised his hand. "Sir," he said, "request permission to try something different this time." "What kind of different?" Whitmore asked slowly. "Aggressive fire," Donovan replied. "I want to hit them before they commit. Engage them while they're still forming up. Force them to think about staying alive instead of thinking about killing us." Whitmore frowned. "That'll chew through your ammo. You'll be dry when things get serious." "Or there won't be a serious fight at all," Donovan countered. "Sir, we've been playing defense for 2 years. And what's it gotten us? 38% of tail gunners aren't finishing their tours. Maybe it's time we stop waiting to get shot and start making them afraid to get close." Whitmore hesitated. On one side, doctrine, training, safety. On the other, a man who'd already shown he could do unnatural things with a gun turret. Finally, the captain sighed. "You've got one mission to prove it," he said. "If we get torn apart, you're off that gun. Deal?" "Deal, sir." They took off at 6:47, engines droning, bomb bay doors sealed, the smell of oil and metal filling the fuselage. They joined the massive formation over East Anglia, climbed into the cold, thin air, crossed the channel. At 8:24, they slipped into German airspace. For a while, it felt routine. The same endless droning engine noise, the same white contrails stretching behind hundreds of aircraft, the same tight formation flying that left no room for mistakes. Then, at 9:19, the calm shattered. "Fighters, 6 o'clock high. 12 bandits." The call echoed through hell's fury. Donovan swung his turret around. There they were, a dozen Bf 109 seconds, 2,000 yards out, sliding into a perfect attack formation. This was the moment every manual described. The moment you were supposed to wait, measure, hold your fire, track the lead ship, conserve your ammunition. Donovan didn't wait for anything. He squeezed the triggers. At maximum range, with almost no chance of a hit, his tracers ripped into the empty air between them and the Germans. The bullets were nowhere near perfect. They stitched the sky wide, falling short, passing off to the side. To a textbook instructor, it looked like pure waste. But out in that formation, 12 German pilots suddenly saw streams of fire reaching out toward them long before they expected it. They were supposed to be safe here, still organizing, still rehearsing their moves. They were not. The formation wobbled. One fighter peeled away hard to the right. Others shifted uneasily, widening their spacing. That one burst hadn't killed anyone, but it had done exactly what Donovan wanted. The attack stopped looking like a drill and started feeling like chaos. The German pilots tried to pull themselves together. Out there, 2,000 yards behind the bombers, the neat attack pattern dissolved into scattered shapes. The lead fighter juked out of the line. Wingmen hesitated, drifted out of formation. The clean, deadly geometry they'd trained for turned ragged. "Donovan, cease fire!" Whitmore's voice snapped in his headphones. "You're burning ammo for nothing." "Negative, sir," Donovan replied calmly. "Just watch." The Germans regrouped, but the tone had changed. No more smooth, confident lineup. Now they tested the edge of the formation, drifting closer, then backing off. They were used to being the hunters. Getting shot at this early made them think about something they didn't like thinking about. Dying. They edged in again. Donovan let them. This time, he didn't fire at 2,000 yards. He waited until they slid in to about 1,500, then fire again, short, sharp bursts. Not meant to kill. Not yet. Meant to remind them, you are not safe. The formation frayed for a second time, but among them, one pilot refused to be intimidated. On the left side of the group, A single Bf 109 held its course. No weaving, no hesitation. The angle, the approach, the discipline, it all screamed one thing to Donovan. Veteran. This was not some green recruit flying scared. This one would press the attack no matter what. Donovan's eyes narrowed behind his goggles. He let the German come. 1,400 yards. 13, 12. At 1,100 yards, a standard gunner would have already been pouring fire into the fighter. Donovan still held his fire. The plane grew bigger in his sights. He could see the curve of the canopy, the flash of the spinning propeller. 1,000. Now, he squeezed the triggers and didn't let go. 200 rounds in about 3 seconds. A solid river of lead streaming straight into the German's flight path. At that range, at that angle, there was nowhere for the fighter to go without ripping its own formation apart. The pilot tried to roll away. Too late. The tracers found metal, then engine, then cockpit. The Messerschmitt's nose erupted, pieces of the cowling flying off. Flames billowed, and the fighter corkscrewed down, trailing black smoke until it tore itself apart. "Good kill," the radio operator yelled. "Tail just nailed one." Donovan didn't even answer. He had already moved on. His guns swung, tracking the others. Behind them, the remaining German fighters had seen enough to understand something important. The tail of Hell's Fury was not a soft target. They pulled back, regrouped, and came again. This time they split, like a pack of wolves circling a wounded animal, 6 sliding in from dead 6 o'clock, 5 more angling in from 7. Classic multi-vector attack. Overwhelm the tail gunner. Force him to split his focus. Create blind spots. Donovan didn't take the bait. "Waist gunners!" he shouted over the intercom. 7 o'clock is yours. I'm married to 6. "Copy that," came the reply from Sergeants Tommy Price and Carl Johnson. The German fighters commit. 6 from straight astern, diving toward Hell's Fury's tail. Donovan breathed out once. Slow. He took the lead fighter again. Short burst. Hit. The aircraft detonated. A flash of orange and black. The formation wobbled. He snapped his aim to the next in line. Burst. Hit. The second fighter disintegrated, torn apart in midair. 30 seconds of pure violence. 3 Messerschmitts gone. The remaining 9 across both attack angles suddenly weren't so brave. They broke their runs, not to reposition, but to get the hell out of that tail gunner's arc. For a moment, the vast empty sky directly behind Hell's Fury belonged to Donovan alone. He checked his ammo. 1,200 rounds used, 800 left. Enough if the day ended soon. The day was not going to end soon. 15 minutes later, they found more trouble. This time it wasn't 12. It was 18. Donovan watched them gathering behind the formation. All the discipline back, all the textbook moves. A full starful forming up, sliding into place. They'd seen what had happened to the first wave. They were going to make sure it didn't happen again. They came from everywhere. 6 o'clock. 5, 4, 7. A full 4-quadrant stern assault. Standard doctrine said, try to cover as many angles as you can, split fire, survive with numbers and luck. Donovan chose something else. He let the fighters at 4 and 5 o'clock enter the waist and ball turret sectors. He trusted his crew to do their jobs. He locked his world down to one slice of sky. 6 o'clock. 6 fighters coming straight in. He didn't flinch, didn't call for evasive maneuver. He held his gun steady on the lead aircraft and opened fire at 1,200 yards, maximum effective range for his twin 50s. Combined closing speed around 400 knots. That gave him about 7 seconds before the lead fighter would be within ideal firing range. He used all 7. He walked his tracers into the German's nose, held them there, forcing the pilot into a deadly choice. Stay in formation and fly straight into the meat grinder, or break and abandon the run. The pilot hesitated a heartbeat too long. At 800 yards, Donovan's rounds chewed the plane apart. The canopy burst. The fighter rolled upside down and dropped out of the sky. 5 left. Distance closing. 400 yards. 3 seconds. Not enough time to carefully track. Not enough time for perfect sight alignment. Donovan made a prediction. He knew where the fighter in the number 2 slot times had times to be in 2 seconds if it stayed on its attack line. He swung his guns not to where it was, but to where physics said it was going to be. Squeezed. The Bf-109 flew straight into the stream of fire. The engine tore open. The plane exploded in a luminous sphere of flame, fragments spinning past Hell's Fury like burning shrapnel. The remaining fighters saw their two lead ships vanish in less than 4 seconds. They broke. No reattack. No reorganization. Just survival instincts taking over. They rolled away, dove, climbed anything to get out of that hellish tunnel of tracer fire behind the fortress. Holy! Whitmore's voice came over the radio, cutting off his own curse. Tail just splashed 2 more. 2 fighters in 3 seconds. Still, Donovan didn't celebrate. His hands moved automatically, feeding in the last belt of ammunition. 400 rounds left. The mission was only half done. They had to reach Augsburg. They had to drop their bombs. Then they had to run the gauntlet all the way home. The sky refused to show mercy. German fighters pulled back, shadowing the formation just beyond effective range. 12 of them, circling like vultures. They didn't attack immediately. They were waiting. Whitmore watched them through his side window and understood. "They're calling in more," he said quietly. "They're not done with us." He was right. 10 minutes later, the radar man picked up more contacts. A lot more. 36 fighters inbound. A mix of BF, 109 seconds, and W, 190 seconds. 48 enemy fighters in total once they joined up with the 12 already shadowing the bombers. Hell's Fury had drifted a few miles off the main bomber stream during the earlier chaos. No P-51 escorts were close enough to help. The nearest fortress was 3 miles away, far too distant for overlapping defensive fire. They were alone. Donovan checked his ammo count again. 380 rounds. 48 fighters. The numbers were a joke. "Captain," Donovan called over the intercom. "Request permission for something. Unconventional." "What now?" Whitmore asked. "Let me attack," Donovan said simply. Silence flooded the intercom for a moment. "Clarify," Whitmore said, voice tight. "They're forming up for a mass assault," Donovan explained. "Give them 2 minutes, and they're going to hit us from every direction at once. We can't defend against that. But right now, while they're still lining up, they're vulnerable. They're thinking like hunters, not targets. If I open up on them now, I can blow their formation apart before they're ready." "You'll be out of ammo in seconds," Whitmore said. "What happens after that?" "Then I hope what I do in those seconds is enough," Donovan replied. "Sir, we're outnumbered 20-1. Defense isn't going to save us. Confusion might. 3 seconds." That's how long Whitmore took to decide. "Do it," he said finally. "If you get us killed, I'm writing your mother the angriest letter in Boston." Donovan didn't even crack a smile. He swung his guns to the heart of the forming German mass. Not a single target. The space-times between times them. 2,000 yards out. Fighters sliding into clean, deadly geometry. Perfect moment. He opened fire. Not bursts. Not controlled taps. Full, sustained barrage. 200 rounds in 8 seconds. Tracers carved through the center of the German formation. He wasn't trying to track any one plane. He was attacking the structure of their attack itself. The invisible lines they used to keep spacing. The instincts that told them how close to fly to each other. One fighter in the middle caught fire. It tumbled into another, trying to evade. They collided, disintegrating in a brutal twist of metal and flame. Another pilot, startled, yanked his plane away and clipped a wingman. In an instant, the precision dissolved into chaos. 48 fighters, scattered like a flock of birds hit by a shotgun blast. The neat attack box vanished. Planes broke left, right, up, down. Pilots shouted over their radios, trying to re-establish order. Whitmore watched it happen in stunned silence. "One tail gunner," he muttered. "One tail gunner just broke the biggest fighter assault I've ever seen." Donovan didn't answer. He knew what he'd accomplished and what he hadn't. He'd bought them time, but time in that sky came in very small doses. 90 seconds later, the Germans came back. This time, they didn't bother with elaborate geometry. No fancy echelon, no staged passes. They came like a storm, 12 fighters from 6 o'clock all at once. A swarm instead of a formation. No choreography, just rage. Donovan knew exactly what they were thinking. "Fine. You want to be aggressive? Let's see how aggressive you are when we come straight down your throat." He didn't go for the ones closest to firing position. He went for the ones that held the time center times of the swarm, the psychological anchor, the plane the others unconsciously formed around. He fired 3 deliberate bursts, 30 rounds each, into 3 targets, one after another. All 3 took hits. 1 exploded. 2 peeled off, bleeding smoke. The shape of the attack collapsed, but 9 fighters were still committed. They roared in cannons, spitting 20mm shells, the air around Hell's Fury turning into a lethal storm of metal. Shells tore past the tail. Some connected. The bomber shuddered, metal screeching. Parts of the skin peeled back. The controls quivered under Whitmore's hands. Donovan held the triggers. Another Messerschmitt went down. Then another. 5 left. 200 yards. He could see faces now. The curve of helmets. The glint of goggles. Young men, angry, disciplined, fearless. He killed them anyway. 2 went up in flames, ripped apart under point-blank fire. 3 remained. 100 yards. Too close now. Any further, and they risked collision with the bomber, risked flying right into its tail. The last 3 fighters did the thing ingrained deepest in every pilot's brain. They chose not to die. They broke off, rolling away hard, their attack run wasted. Donovan squeezed the triggers again. Nothing. The guns clacked dry. "Tails out," he called. "I'm empty. No ammo." "Copy," Whitmore replied. "Damage?" Quick checks came over the intercom. Ball turret dinged, rudder strained. Hydraulics nicked, but the fortress was still flying. No one dead. No one bleeding out on the floor. That didn't change one fact. The tail was mute now. The German pilots didn't know how many rounds Donovan had left, but they knew something else. Every time they came at that bomber, somebody died. They regrouped again, farther back this time, a cluster of 27 fighters remaining from the original 48. They turned in for one more try. They knew the tail guns' times should times be empty by now. They'd seen the volume of fire, the continuous streams of tracers. Logic said that gun was spent, so they chose the one approach that capitalized on that. 6 o'clock load, directly into the blind spot of an empty tail. Methodical, slow, controlled. Execution, not combat. Donovan watched them, hands resting on guns that could no longer save anyone. He couldn't fire, but he could still aim. He tracked the lead fighter as if every box beside him was full of ammunition. Perfect, smooth follow. No hesitation. No sign the guns were dead. The German pilot saw the twin barrels locked on his cockpit. The same guns that had massacred his comrades all morning. Every rational part of him knew they times might times be empty, but instincts don't speak rational language. They speak fear. The lead fighter jerked right, tearing out of formation in a hard break. His wingmen followed, reacting to his sudden move. The entire attack line unraveled, not because Donovan was shooting, because Donovan times could have times been shooting. The reputation of those guns did the work the bullets no longer could. "They're breaking off!" the ball turret gunner shouted, disbelief cracking his voice. "They're actually leaving!" And they were. 27 fighters, after losing 21 of their number, decided that one bomber was too high a price to pay. They turned away, retreated into the distance, and didn't come back. Hell's Fury flew on to Augsburg. They reached the target. They dropped their bombs. They turned for home. They passed through more fighter activity on the way back, but none of the Germans chose to waste planes trying to finish off the bomber with the mad tail gunner. Word spreads fast on combat radio nets. One B-17 had chewed up too many fighters for comfort. When Hell's Fury finally rolled back onto the runway at Framlingham at 16:47, 9 hours after takeoff, she looked like she'd flown through a steel storm. 47 bullet holes, 13 cannon impacts, a ruptured hydraulic line, a cracked rudder, and yet she was still flying. The crew chief, Murphy, walked around the tail section, mouth tight, eyes scanning the damage. Then he opened the ammo boxes. Empty. All of them. He found Donovan sitting on the tarmac nearby, back against the wheel, cigarette between his fingers, expression calm. "You burned it all," Murphy said. 2,000 rounds. Every bullet we gave you. Didn't have enough to waste. Donovan said quietly. Had to make everyone count. Whitmore walked up, holding a clipboard with notes from debriefings, radio logs, escort reports. How many, Frank? The captain asked. Murphy checked. 12 confirmed, he said. 4 probables. 3 damaged. Whitmore looked at Donovan for a long moment. 12 kills in one mission, he said. 19 if the probables and damaged are counted. 4 minutes of real fighting. Before nightfall, every tail gunner on the base knew the story. By the next day, bomb groups across England were asking the same question. What the hell did that guy in Hell's Fury do back there? And higher up the chain of command, someone else was asking a different question. Can we teach other men to do the same? The next morning, long before the sun burned through the English fog, a black staff car rolled onto the airfield at Framlingham. Everyone knew what that meant. Someone important wanted answers. Major General Frederick Anderson, commanding officer of 8th Bomber Command, stepped out of the vehicle. No fanfare, no entourage. Just a man with a folder under his arm and a mission in his mind. He walked straight into the enlisted barracks. Inside, Donovan was sitting on a simple wooden stool, field stripping his twin 50 caliber machine guns, cleaning them the same way a boxer tapes his hands, calmly, methodically, like someone preparing for the next fight, not recovering from the last. Anderson watched for a moment before speaking. Sergeant Donovan. Donovan stood immediately. Sir, at ease, Anderson said. I'm here because yesterday you broke every rule in the book and somehow ended up rewriting the damn thing. Donovan said nothing. He didn't know yet if he was about to be congratulated or court-martialed. Anderson opened the folder. I read your reports. I read your pilot's account. I've listened to radio logs from escort fighters, and I've seen the numbers. 12 confirmed kills. 19 total if we count probables. 1 bomber turning back 48 fighters. No losses, no casualties. He closed the folder. That doesn't happen by accident. Donovan finally spoke. Sir, I did what made sense. If we keep letting the Germans choose how and when to attack us, they'll keep tearing our formations apart. Explain, Anderson said. Donovan outlined everything, the early fire, the psychological pressure, targeting wingmen instead of leaders, aggressive disruption, attacking during formation phase, concentrating firepower on the most critical slice of sky rather than dividing it. He described the way the German fighters hesitated when they lost their shape, how the smallest break of discipline became a ripple that turned into collapse. He talked about something no manual had ever taught. Fear travels faster through a formation than bullets. Anderson listened without interrupting once. When Donovan finished, the general asked the only question that mattered. Can you teach this? Donovan hesitated. Sir, it's not for everyone. Some men freeze when fighters show up. Some think too much. Some wait for perfect shots. What I did out there, you need gunners who think like street fighters. Men who don't mind getting hit if it means hitting harder. Find them, Anderson said. Train them. Effective immediately, you're reassigned to a new program. You will shape 8th Air Force tail gunnery doctrine. Donovan swallowed. Sir, with respect, I'd rather stay with my crew. Anderson stepped closer. Sergeant, your crew is alive because of you. But other crews are dying every day because their gunners don't know what you know. You want to stay with your 9? Or save 9,000? The answer hung in the air. Donovan picked the greater fight. Within 48 hours, he found himself standing in front of a chalkboard in a drafty hangar, facing the first group of hand-selected gunners. Some were seasoned veterans who'd survived by luck. Others were new replacements, nervous and eager. Donovan didn't start with diagrams or technical details. He started with one sentence. Fear happens when you wait. Confidence happens when you act. Then he began rewriting everything they thought they knew. The Donovan Doctrine was born. It wasn't written in a book. It wasn't approved by committees or developed by scholars. It came from one man deciding that survival meant taking the fight to the enemy. The doctrine revolved around 5 principles. 1. Seize the initiative. Attack before the enemy does. Engage formations while they're still organizing. Disrupt intent before it becomes action. Donovan taught that the first burst of fire should land before the fighters had even settled into attack lines. Even if the bullets missed, the message didn't. You're not safe. You're already under pressure. Your plan is broken before it starts. 2. Use psychological warfare. A scared pilot makes mistakes. A comfortable one kills you. He drilled this into trainees. You don't need to kill every fighter. You need to make the formation hesitate. The enemy fights worse when they feel hunted. Donovan showed them how to shoot where a pilot expected safety to ruin predictability. Fear was a weapon. 3. Focus fire. Don't waste ammunition covering everything. Concentrate on the most dangerous threat. New gunners always scattered their focus, trying to shoot at anything that moved. Donovan taught them that chaos killed more gunners than enemy bullets. He taught them to trust the other gun positions, to carve their slice of the sky, and dominate it without looking away. 4. Ammunition economy through aggression. Waste fewer bullets by firing more earlier. It sounded contradictory. But Donovan proved that 20 bullets fired early could prevent a fighter from ever launching 100 bullets later. A burst at extreme range was cheap. Repairing a bomber riddled by cannon shells was not. 5. Accept risk, reduce losses. Aggression exposes the gunner, but protects the bomber. The tail position might take more fire, but the formation would take less. Donovan reminded them, "You're the shield. If you do your job right, nobody else gets hit." At first, higher command resisted. Traditional instructors called it reckless. Some officers said it had turned gunners into ammunition-burning madmen. But soon, numbers spoke louder than criticism. During March 1944, before Donovan's methods spread, tail gunner casualty rate, 38%. By June, after Donovan's training teams had been deployed, tail gunner casualty rate, 23%. A 15% drop. That was hundreds of men still alive. But that wasn't the only number that changed. Before Donovan's doctrine, German fighters completed 52% of their planned attack runs. After, German completion rate fell to 27%, meaning more than half of German attacks never fully formed. They broke apart under early fire. Hesitation, confusion, fear. The psychological shift spread through the Luftwaffe faster than through American command. Radio intercepts from German fighter units began describing aggressive tail fire, early tracer pressure, intimidating engagement, impossible to approach B-17 seconds with certain gunners. Some German squadron leaders issued warnings. Do not engage bombers showing heavy early fire. Losses too great. That was new. The Germans had never been scared of American tail gunners before. By the summer, Donovan had personally trained 300 men. Each one of them carried the same defiant mindset, the same sharp instincts, the same fearlessness. Not all made it. The Donovan doctrine wasn't something you could memorize. It required a certain type of man, decisive, aggressive, calm under fire. Donovan washed out 30% of trainees, anyone who hesitated, anyone who clung to defensive habits, anyone who lacked the instinct to strike first. Those who passed became legends. One gunner, Sergeant Thomas Bailey, shot down 16 fighters in his first 4 missions. Another, Sergeant Robert Chen, survived 27 missions without a single major hit to his tail section. Across the 8th Air Force, these men accounted for nearly half of all tail gunner victories from March to August. Fortresses began returning from missions with fewer holes. More crews survived their required 30 sorties. Pilots started requesting Donovan-trained gunners by name. And the Luftwaffe? They adapted the only way they could. They avoided the bombers with aggressive gunners altogether. When German manuals were updated that summer, one line stood out. Avoid direct stern approaches on American formations exhibiting early aggressive defensive fire. Translated: if you see a tail gunner shooting early, leave him alone. Donovan never returned to combat. March 6th remained his last day in the tail. High command kept him where he was most valuable, teaching men to survive the thing he had faced and beaten. He didn't talk about it, didn't brag, didn't ask for medals. He just trained the next man. And the next, and because of that, thousands lived. His doctrine spread far beyond B-17 seconds. It filtered into fighter escort strategy, into naval gunnery, into Cold War aerial training. Even early missile defense systems used Donovan's principle. Hit the enemy before they organize. Confuse the attack. Make them fear the approach. But Donovan himself? He went back to Boston after the war, married his sweetheart, worked construction, raised kids, never once boasted about what he'd done. When the Boston Globe printed his obituary in 1998, it mentioned only one line about his war service. Tail gunner, 8th Air Force, developed new tactics. It didn't mention saving 3,000 lives. It didn't mention rewriting doctrine. It didn't mention facing down 48 fighters alone. It didn't mention March 6th, 1944. But the men he trained knew. The night before his funeral, in a quiet South Boston bar, a group of gray-haired veterans raised glasses in his honor. Bailey himself, long retired, stood and spoke. Mike Donovan didn't think he was a hero. He thought he was just doing his job. But every one of us who made it home because a German fighter got scared and broke off, that was him. Not 12 kills. 12,000 lives. By late 1944, the Donovan Doctrine was no longer just a set of techniques. It had become a quiet revolution, spreading from bomber to bomber, crew to crew, reshaping the psychology of air combat. Yet for Donovan himself, the war was fading into memory even as his influence grew. He visited bases across England, stepping into chilly hangars filled with wooden gun mounts, chalkboards, vibration simulators, and young men who still smelled of cigarettes, sweat, and nervous anticipation. Some were barely out of high school. Others had already flown missions and tasted fear firsthand. All of them listened to Donovan the way soldiers listen to a man who survived a nightmare they hadn't yet faced. He never bothered dressing the part. No polished boots, no dramatic speeches, no ego. Just a man in a flight jacket, sleeves rolled up, speaking in a voice that carried the weight of someone who had seen the worst and refused to let it break him. He'd walk up and down the firing lines, correcting posture, adjusting stances, explaining angles, drilling timing. He made men practice short bursts until their arms went numb, then made them do it again. He taught them to breathe like fighters, not gunners, to aim at intention, not position, to shoot before emotion could take hold. Don't think, he'd say. Act. Thinking gets you killed. Movement keeps you alive. Some men hated him for how hard he pushed. Many feared him, but all respected him. By August 1944, even bomber group commanders were asking for Donovan-trained gunners to be placed on their crews. Escort fighters began coordinating intercepts around the aggressive fire zones created by Donovan's doctrine. In debriefings, Luftwaffe pilots reported high psychological difficulty approaching certain aircraft. That was a diplomatic way to say, we don't want to go near them anymore. By the end of the European campaign, 8th Air Force Headquarters compiled the final statistics. They stunned everyone, even Donovan. Between March and August, 1,944. Over 300 American bombers avoided destruction due directly to disrupted German attacks. More than 3,000 airmen survived missions they otherwise might not have. Aggressive tail gunners reduced German engagement effectiveness by nearly 30%. Total Luftwaffe losses attributable to Donovan-trained gunners surpassed 800 aircraft. These weren't just numbers. Each one represented a man who went home, a plane that didn't fall out of the sky, a crew that made it back to their bunks instead of disappearing into black smoke over Germany. But Donovan never read the final reports. He never asked. To him, the war was something he'd left behind. After the war ended in Europe, Donovan was discharged quietly, without ceremony. He returned to South Boston and went back to working with his hands construction, carpentry, long days that ended with sore muscles and the satisfaction of building something instead of destroying it. He married Margaret O'Connor, the girl he'd written letters to between missions. They had 3 kids. On weekends he coached Little League baseball and fixed neighbors' fences. On summer nights he sat on his porch listening to Red Sox games on an old radio. He never talked about the war. If someone asked, he'd shrug and say he did his job like everyone else. He'd talk about the cold, or the food, or the long hours, never about the tail turret, the guns, the fighters. The day he rewrote history. He'd kept the Distinguished Service Cross they gave him in a shoebox under the bed. Margaret found it once and asked why he didn't display it. "It belongs to the crew," he said. "I just pulled the trigger." She never asked again. The decades passed. The world changed. Jet engines replaced propellers. Missiles replaced dogfights. Bombers grew faster, sleeker, deadlier. But the core of Donovan's doctrine lived on early engagement, psychological disruption, initiative over reaction. When the Cold War began, American pilots studied engagement principles derived from Donovan. Naval aviators incorporated his logic into carrier defense. Even Soviet tacticians referenced aggressive early suppression in their manuals, indirect descendants of the idea born in the tale of Hell's Fury. But Donovan remained anonymous. Just another veteran with a story he never told. When he died in 1998 at age 76, there was no military flyover, no rows of uniformed men saluting, no speeches about heroism. The obituary in the Boston Globe was simple. Michael Donovan, husband, father, construction worker, Army Air Forces veteran. One line mentioned he had developed new air gunnery tactics. It didn't mention March 6th, 1944. It didn't mention the 12 kills. It didn't mention the Staffel he broke apart alone. It didn't mention the doctrine that saved thousands. But the men who owed him their lives remembered. The night before his funeral, a group of elderly veterans gathered in a dim South Boston bar. They wore old bomber jackets, patches cracked with age. Their hands shook lifting their glasses. One by one, they told stories not just of Donovan, but of what his training had done for them. How one burst at 900 yards had scared a fighter off. How a single aggressive tracer pattern had unraveled an attack. How they'd survived because Donovan had taught them not to cower in a turret, but to fight like men with nothing to lose. Then Sergeant Tom Bailey, now 74, stood to give the final toast. "Mike Donovan never asked for credit," he said, "but every gunner who lived through that war knows the truth. He changed the way we fought. He changed the way they fought. And he saved more of us than he ever knew." They raised their glasses. To Mad Mike Donovan, the tail gunner who made the Luftwaffe think twice. Modern military academies still teach an evolved form of Donovan's doctrine. Not in books bearing his name, but in principles embedded deep inside modern aerial engagement. Strike early. Attack intent. Force hesitation. Seize initiative. Turn defense into offense. These ideas guide drone, intercept protocols, missile defense algorithms, even space combat theoretical models. Few know where these ideas came from, but the truth is simple. They came from a 17-year-old kid from South Boston who learned that the only way to survive a fight was to hit first. March 6th, 1944, lasted only 4 minutes. 4 minutes in which one tail gunner destroyed 12 enemy fighters. 4 minutes that reversed the power dynamic in the skies over Europe. 4 minutes that turned desperation into doctrine. 4 minutes that saved thousands who would never know his name. Michael Mad Mike Donovan didn't become a hero because he wanted to. He became one because he refused to wait for death to find him. He went hunting first.